The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, I'm Joni Siegel, the host of the Addiction Podcast. In 2022, over 100,000 people died from drug and alcohol abuse, and that number is growing daily. Fentanyl poisoning, pot, cocaine, heroin, and even psychedelics and alcohol all contribute to this crisis, while we're bombarded with promotions from thousands of rehabs. Newborns are born addicted, and the majority of homeless people struggle with drug addiction. Drug dealers exploit online resources to sell to teens, and antidepressant use is spiraling out of control. This podcast features brutally honest guest interviews revealing harsh realities and offering hope and solutions through their stories. We don't sugarcoat anything. Guests speak raw and real. More importantly, you'll find inspiration to understand, overcome, and achieve recovery, whether for yourself or to help others, some within your own family, many among your friends or associates. Whether you're seeking help or just a glimmer of hope, our podcast equips you with the latest insights to confront this generational battle. Many listeners tell us they want to join the fight, but do not have the time or money to act, lobby, or just help. If that's you, go to www.patreon.com/theaddictionpodcast and see how you can help. So Charlotte Bismuth, it's lovely to have you on the podcast again. You know, it's funny, I say it's lovely to have you on. We're talking about addiction. We're talking about people dying from drug overdoses. But anyway, I'm glad you're back, okay? It is still lovely to talk to you. And what are you going to tell these people? Because you're going to talk about the Purdue case. What do you want to say to these people?
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to tell all the families who were affected by or involved in the Purdue bankruptcy and even the Endo bankruptcy. It wasn't you, it was them. They made it so hard and they shouldn't have.
Hi, my name is Amy Newman, and my husband Bobby and I have a business called Newman Intervention Services. We provide intervention services for families who have loved ones struggling with drug addiction. Our goal is to help individuals get the support and treatment they need to overcome addiction and start on the path to recovery. With our personalized and compassionate approach, we guide families through the challenging process of getting their loved one into rehab and onto a road of a healthier future. Together, we can make a positive difference in the lives of those affected by drugs. If you or someone you know is in need of an intervention, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let's work together and bring hope and healing to those battling addiction.
Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
I just don't think people who are grieving should have to deal with that kind of a legal complexity.
I agree with you. I'm going to pause for 1 second. You froze in the middle of what you just said. You said it could have been, and then there was nothing. Maybe you could just say that part again?
Sure. Let me
just ask you again, what would you want to say to the families who were involved in this whole Purdue case? Families who lost kids to addiction or death?
I want to tell them that it wasn't hard because you didn't understand. It wasn't hard because you missed something. It was hard because they made it hard and they shouldn't have. People who are grieving should face an easy legal process to get accountability and compensation. And that's not what happened here.
I think that's a very strong message. And it's obvious to me because I have a tendency to look at the evil that is Purdue and the evil that is Sackler. Obviously, they did that so that people would not then pursue it and ask for more money. At least that's my viewpoint.
I think that's true. Although I honestly think that they were more concerned with how much money they could retain than what anybody else might end up getting. That was really the main driver. It was all structured to make it easier for the Sacklers and the attorneys and all the various companies that they used and their executives to, gather their fees and preserve their trust funds. What's striking about this is that from the outset, families who were harmed by Purdue and harmed by Endo had such a hard road to go down. Even just to understand, what happened to these lawsuits that we filed in state court, and then they got removed to a federal court to be part of this, this big consolidated opioid case. Why did all those cases get frozen? Why is the case in bankruptcy court? What is, how can families get involved in bankruptcy court? And what does that mean for our case and our family and for the timeline of compensation?
And how can a decision in bankruptcy court absolve someone of criminal activity?
Well, yes, and it can't. Right.
But right. That's what that judge tried to do.
Well, it didn't affect their criminal exposure. I think that's a separate question of whether DOJ will ever be able to bring a case against the Sacklers. Yes, I share
my eye roll.
Your eye roll and your sigh about that. But, effectively, it was a way of taking them out of the system that we rely on, where we're all supposed to be able to have our day in court if we get hurt. And by putting it in bankruptcy court, it turns it into a negotiation that's all about money, and a negotiation that is led by the very people who committed the harm, the company and its owners. They have their hands on the steering wheel in that kind of context. So, at the outset, it was really the key message that we were trying to get out, which is this is the last game in town, right? You have to be involved in the bankruptcy if you want to be heard. And now that the Supreme Court has invalidated the plan and said you can't force people to release the Sacklers from any civil liability. You can't force people to do that without asking them their consent, at the very least. Now there's an opportunity, which is what happens now. How do we rethink this process so that, not all of our resources and attention are focused on keeping these companies alive,
right?
Rather on helping the families.
Right. And just so you know, I did this when she said, talk about the Supreme Court. That's why she laughed. And how do they do that? What do they do? How do they get involved? Because if I were a parent, I'm not sure I would go as far as Ed Bish, for example, but I would want to know, what can I do?
So I think, honestly, it's difficult because the typical avenues that we have to ask for help are closed off in this case because of conflicts of interest. What I mean is that the other parties in the case are the state attorneys general. Usually the state attorney general's office is somewhere people can go to say, listen, I have this legal problem, a consumer issue, or I was harmed. How do I handle this? Do you have, legal advice available? Can you help me, help guide me? They can't do that here because they have a conflict of interest. They also want the money. So families are really left to fend for themselves or join one of these private law firms that purports to represent them and in fact just really wants to, push them all to make a decision approving the plan so that the law firm can get paid. The most effective way that we found, it really works if many people do it, is writing letters to the court, just having the court receive letter after letter that says, I was harmed. This destroyed my life. I don't know what's happening. No one's keeping me updated. I don't feel like I have a voice. And, yes, I need the compensation, but I also need accountability. Speaking to your elected officials, congressional members did a really good job holding a hearing a couple of years ago with David Sackler in attendance. And that was kind of a watershed moment. So I think elected officials have to understand. And this is not a political issue. This is not.
It's not a partisan issue.
It is not. Everyone is affected. And in fact, I actually believe that the grief and the frustration and the silencing of so many families is really what has torn us apart.
Yep.
Because when you disregard the pain of people who have lost so much, and the system seems not to even see that pain or give them avenues, we turn against each other.
I think you make a very good point. And I think that I want to just remind everybody listening, if you don't vote for your congressperson, then don't listen to my next sentence. But if you do vote for your congressperson, you have every right to call their office and complain and get an email address and send an email and get a mailing address and send a letter. They represent you. And I think sometimes, Charlotte, that I've run into people where they go, really? I can talk to my congressperson? And even I have forgotten sometimes. I had an issue with a DMV once. And my husband said, that's why we know our state representative. Call his office. And she was able to help me. And we're talking about more on the federal level now, but this is why you vote, and this is why they're there. And if they don't listen to you, then you don't vote for them, and you tell everybody else not to vote for them.
That is correct. I would respectfully say that even if you haven't voted and you have been disillusioned, I know, but
it's true though.
But call them and tell them why you don't believe anymore. Tell them what you need to see and what you need to hear and the kind of change that you're waiting for. And what they'll probably say to you is, you need to be part of that change. And I think you and I can agree on that. But they are key. That is why we have them. And I think also it's a very good way to get them all talking to each other about an issue that affects every single community in America, no matter, social class, employment, education level, background, origins. Everybody is affected. Nobody is immune from this.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review.
We appreciate you listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. We don't do this podcast because we are former addicts. We don't do this podcast because we have loved ones who have suffered from addiction. We do this podcast because we feel that addiction is one of the biggest problems facing the world today, and that no matter who you are, no matter your religion, no matter your income status, no matter your race, no matter anything about you, addiction affects you. This podcast is a free resource for anybody looking for help with it. And it doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be a CEO. You can be a housewife. You can be a man who's out of a job, and you can still call your elected official and make a stink about it, frankly.
Absolutely. And, I think I would say if were recommending how to make a stink, this is what I would say. Mm-hmm. For one, people need to have their day in court. If we are harmed by a corporation and that corporation, committed a fraud or they were neglectful, there need to be solutions for the people who were harmed. They need to have a day in court. That is just a cornerstone of our belief system and our values.
Yep.
And secondly, when you create those systems, you have to make sure that people can participate and can understand. And I'm sorry, but sending families, 200 to 300 page booklets written in legalese. And I say this as, an attorney, now retired from the bar, but a former prosecutor. You can't do that. I'm sorry. That is wrong. It sends the wrong message. It excludes people, and it makes them feel even more despair. I mean, I can't imagine already the level of despair that families are experiencing. I have 4 kids. I in my daily life, so many times a day, I think about these families, and to add the injury of throwing them into this system where, even the documents addressed to them make absolutely no sense. It's just cruel.
Yep.
And we can
agree.
do that.
I agree. Charlotte, when you say we, who are you talking about? We.
When I say we can do better?
No, but I mean, are you part of an organization?
Right. So, I've been working with a group of activists for a couple of years, including Ed Bish, who I admire so much.
Yep.
And others. We got together in the early days of the Purdue bankruptcy because we all had the same question, which was, what is going on? What is this? And a wonderful law professor named Jonathan Lipson, on his own time as a volunteer all these years, has written incredible articles, but most importantly, done webinars and conference calls to help families understand the bankruptcy process. Because I'm a lawyer, I don't understand bankruptcy. It's another language.
Right.
And Professor Lipson put it all into language and terms that we could understand. And he helped people who wanted to be involved understand how to get involved. So, this sort of loose group of activists, we're working together really on public education, and we're still in touch. Some people became involved more formally through the Committee for Accountability, but they were separately represented. But they're, through the families that I met through the Stanley case, who've had to navigate the bankruptcy, and others, I feel like there's a growing group of people who have this frustration and sense of determination that the system needs to change.
Yep. I agree. If someone wanted to have access to any of those webinars and papers that he has written, how do they do that?
So I would Google Jonathan Lipson.
Lipson?
Lipson. He's at Temple University.
Okay.
School of Law. Ed Bish has given a lot of interviews about the Purdue bankruptcy, and I think he has really captured the essence of it, which is a scam, honestly.
Yep.
There have been an increasing number of articles, I think, in the media pointing out how confusing the process has been. But to be honest, I don't think there exists the resources yet to guide people through these bankruptcies. I made a proposal to a law school that they should create a clinic where law students working with bankruptcy professors should represent families in these bankruptcy proceedings. It didn't get taken up, but that is a solution.
Yep.
Bar attorneys general can't do it. I'm calling out to all the law schools in America, or the legal aid organizations. There is a gap, a huge gap in representation here. People need help. This stuff is really complicated, but it's vital.
I agree. And I think that so often what happens is a company like Purdue commits crimes, and then people complain, and they they get a lawsuit filed, and then it moves into bankruptcy and it's just gone, because now it's just, okay, well, now the company is just covering their butt and just handling their money. And the people who have been affected by it, they're nowhere in terms of the thought process at that point, you know?
That's right. And there's another force at work, which is the efficiency of the court system. And this is a part of it that I think is so interesting and often overlooked, which is, we all want our court system to work well. And so you have a lot of judges and lawyers and administrative people who think about, well, if we're going to have these hundreds of thousands of lawsuits all about the same company, maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe there's a way to prevent, the first few people who file a lawsuit from getting all the compensation. There's a way to make it fair. And that's important. But in doing that, they still have to make it user-friendly. They still have to make it legible, accessible. And, again, I speak as a former lawyer. I understand that efficiency argument, but I'm, telling the lawyers out there and the people who work on these settlement plans, it is not working. You are not creating materials and systems that people have the time or the ability or the help to understand or navigate. And it's not fair. It's just not fair. They have to do better.
I agree. It's funny. I'm going to have lunch with a judge next week, and I'll talk to her about this.
Well, you know what? I would say bring with you, if you know anybody who filed a claim in the Endo or Purdue bankruptcy, bring with you one of the packets that they received. And if you don't have one, I can get you one.
I don't know other than Ed, and I don't, yeah.
Well, Ed has one. Otherwise, I will give you one.
Okay.
Show this judge the packet that families received and ask what she would think if she received that.
I'll do it, because she's a friend of mine. Now, I think she's in family court, but still, it's a good point. And I don't know where she went to law school, but maybe she could make a call and see if her law school, her alma mater, would get involved in something like that. Do you know?
That would be incredible. And I think especially as a family court judge, she would be sensitive to the importance of having people from all walks of life be able to understand a document, because it goes to the core of their existence. This is about their kids, their ability to finance their life, to keep going, to also believe in the system that we live in. I mean, what's more important?
Yep. It's her job, really, to make sure that the people understand. And I'm going to bet that she spends a lot of time ensuring that the people who come before her understand, what has been put before them, what they've been asked to sign, or what the decisions are and how they can affect them. But anyway, I'll do that. If she can get something going with her law school, I will get them in touch with you. And you could tell them what they should do, because I think what you're saying makes absolute sense. And I just don't think it's that hard to do what you're suggesting, which is to make these documents understood and easily navigable by people who are just devastated by grief. It's one thing if, and even still, if it's like la-di-da and it's like you're reading a book that, you want to understand and it's a little hard to understand, great. You can delve into it and you can use a dictionary. But when you're devastated by the loss of a child or a loved one, and then you're supposed to try and navigate, it's just so much worse.
It's awful. The mother of one of the victims in the Stanley case, a young man who died, who was poisoned at the age of 21 after having taken medications prescribed by a doctor. She and I are still in touch. She's been navigating these bankruptcies, and she texted me finally and said, I give up. I'm too old. I'm too tired. She still works full time. She's still raising another son, and she just couldn't do it, and that breaks my heart, because if it isn't for her, who is it for?
Right.
And I would say that bankruptcy court has a lot to learn from family court, because in bankruptcy court, value is money. The only value they understand is money. And if they're going to tell us that they are the right place to handle these cases where hundreds of thousands of people have been hurt, then you've got to change that.
Yep.
And so many of the bankruptcy court hearings, we had people call in, or when we were listening to the hearing, we could hear families call in and try to talk to the judge. And the judge would say, "I'm sorry, you're not on the agenda." And it's like, well,
they should be.
And how do they get on? And why isn't that a priority? But anyway, I could go on for hours about that. And I do hope law schools think about filling that gap and representing the people who need it.
Well, this is why you're here. You can go on about it. Maybe not for hours, but so what are some of the things that you're doing right now? What are you working on right now? Did you write a new book?
So my book actually was published in paperback form, which is very exciting because, I know that we've gone through so many different waves, sadly, of the overdose epidemic. And we have sadly come a long way from the days when we thought that 40,000, 50,000 deaths a year were, unfathomable. And where, doctors were sort of at the center of it. But I think the story of Dr. Lee, and more importantly, of the team that I worked with, of families, survivors, detectives, experts, who all came together and fought for accountability, is such an important story, because there has not been any accountability in this overdose epidemic for the people who are most responsible. And we need that. We need that as a country.
I agree. No, I was just Googling. I'm sorry. While you were talking, I was listening. Killer in White Coat. Is that your new book?
It is the new title of my paperback. We changed the title from Bad Medicine. I think Killer in a White Coat, captures really the essence of the book. And also we made the subtitle, focus on the team, because again, this is about working together to create hope and to get accountability. I also had the opportunity to write a new foreword for the book. And I did that with a couple things in mind. One was how devastated we would have been in 2010, 2014, to know how many more people would die in the coming years. And also, I'm originally from France, and opioid sales in France have increased by 300 or 400%. And yet there is a very, very strong denial in the medical and field and in the government that there is a problem or that anything will happen. And I'm hoping that this book will remind people in every country, or people with friends or family abroad, this is not exclusive to the US. Americans didn't do anything wrong. There's not something, about us that made us more vulnerable. This is the rollout of a highly planned, highly profitable, fraudulent marketing strategy. And wherever it goes, it is going to cause death. I hope we can get through. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. Charlotte, anything else you'd like to share with our audience? I so appreciate you talking to us today, but anything else you want to tell them?
I do. I think, I've heard of 2 initiatives in communities that I think are so extraordinary. And if there is one in your community, look it up. And I think families will appreciate these experts and what they're doing. And I just want to say that this is the key to finding our way out, and also to recognizing the humanity of every single person we've lost and the people they loved who were left behind. So there are communities that have created what's called an OD map system, where they, all those sort of institutions, healthcare, legal, medical in a community get together to allow a tracking of all the poisonings so that they can understand, where the bad batches are coming in, what's happening, and respond to them quickly together. And the other is the overdose review process, which is, it's called OFR, and which is a system where, again, medical experts, forensic experts, nurses, treatment experts get together and go through every single overdose death in a community and with a fine-tooth comb and talk about what could have been done and how we can prevent it. So to me, any of those solutions that really honor each life and try to learn and try to help us, save lives and help the families are so important. And I just want to say I really, really appreciate the people who built those systems and are working on them every day.
I think that's awesome. Where would you find it? If you wanted to find it, just Google it?
Yeah, I would Google OFR.
Okay.
And
or overdose map system.
Yeah, it's the Overdose Fatality Review System, or the OD map. And just, check it out, see if it exists in your community. And if not, reach out to your biggest local hospital, to, local government, and, see if it's something that they can start. There are really good kits for how to get started. There's a lot of support available. And this is,
Okay, no, wait a second. Where do you get the kit?
So the kit is online. If you go to the OFR website, they have kits for communities that can teach them how to create, the alliances between the different groups in your community to put this system in place.
And do you know if it's OFR.com or OFR.org or .gov?
So it's the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which is part of DOJ. They have a program called the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Abuse Program.
Are you going to make me say that again? Say, okay, one more time. The Bureau of what?
Overdose. If you Google overdose fatality review.
Okay.
It's www.ofrtools.org.
OFR Tools. And
you'll find the toolkit. And they talk about information sharing, guides for practitioners who participate. They profile different teams that are doing it. They, offer webinars or mentor training, practice groups. And, to me, this is what I love about the U.S. It really is.
I mean, I think that's huge. So once again, for listeners, OF, like Frank, OFRtools.org. It's right there at the top. It says toolkits. If you don't have one of these overdose fatality review programs or projects or process or systems in your area, you can start it. Get one of the toolkits. Yeah. Get people on board. I mean, this is good because I think so often, with a parent who's lost a child, and we've talked to obviously many, but there's kind of two ways you can go. One is to just give into the grief and do nothing. And the other is to be like an Ed Bish. And if you don't want to get quite as far out of your comfort zone as I'm sure Ed has, do this. Go to ofrtools.org and get one of those toolkits and get it going in your area. See how many lives you can save.
And at the very least, appreciate the people who are doing it, because it's what Mr. Rogers used to say, right? Look at the helpers. These people are making a huge difference. They're innovating and they're setting an example. And I'm amazed by them.
That's a huge message. It's wonderful. Charlotte, thank you for talking to us today. Thank you for updating us and giving us hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your podcast.
So there you have it. Messages from me. You can call your elected officials if you have been affected by the opioid epidemic, and you can demand that they do something about it. And then go to O like Oscar, F like Frank, R like Robert, OFRtools.org. And you can make sure that there is an overdose overdose fatality review process in your community where they look at overdoses and see what could be done to avoid them or avoid more of them. And the reason why this is important is because I've heard over and over again about how sometimes overdoses are just ruled, like accidental death, and that's not always the case. And so there needs to be a review process in place. So you can get it done going in your community, or you can tap into it if there's already one in your community. We will be back again with another episode next week.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.